Happy lunch hour, gang. Okay, still chugging along on Tuesday afternoon and interesting stuff. I'm going to talk about something we haven't talked about in a while. Russia, Ukraine, the war over there, right? Remember, this thing's still going on? You know, was it 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago? We had the Trump peace plan put into play, and it looked like, okay, this was going to be the end of the war. And then Zelenskyy came out and said, nope, we're not ceding any territory to Russia. That's it. We're not signing on this peace deal. Okay? And as Trump had told him before, you don't have any cards on the table. So Trump's response was, good, we're out. And of course, Zelensky's pissed, right? And he's still convinced that Europe will help him. Now, in Trump's idea, us being out means we're not giving any more weapons, money, whatever it is, to Ukraine. Good. He's not against selling any of the equipment to Europe and then let Europe give it away. So there is a difference there. Okay, so we still could have equipment. The one thing Zelenskyy is not going to get anymore is any U.S. intelligence, which is pretty much crucial for what's going on over there. So he's stuck between a rock and a hard place there. So then Zelenskyy's idea was, well, Europe can keep paying for this. And, you've seen the stories that the UK is preparing to go to war against Russia. I think I touched on this yesterday. Great, with the 90 airplanes that the UK has, they'll be able to go up against the 2,600 that Russia has. Sure, a war between the UK and Russia would last about 20 minutes. Then there's all the talk, well, we're going to build a whole EU army. Good luck. With a bunch of equipment that doesn't work, with a bunch of people that aren't trained, and as I said yesterday, you might be a formidable force by 2040. Okay. But see, here's the thing that makes no sense, just so you understand how this works. We all know that the Ukrainian people are fleeing the country like crazy. They're all over the place in Poland, in Germany, anywhere they can get to, right? We've seen that. You remember all the stories of the recruiters, if you will, dragging people off the street and throwing them into a car and saying, you're now in the military. Well, here's the problem. And I want you to understand this because this is where your tax dollars have been going. In Ukraine, they will not, it's public policy, draft anybody into the military who is a college student. So give you this. In 2022, there were approximately 30,000 college students in Ukraine. College is free over there. The government pays for it, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, in 2025, they have 230,000 students going to college. And all those 200,000 people could care less about getting an education. They're there so they can't get drafted. Now, to give you an idea how this works, okay, and you can thank Mrs. P for this information, too. College is paid for by the government, so they don't have tuition payments or anything like that. On top of that, the government gives students a stipend to pay their food bill, to pay their electric bill, so they can focus on their studies and not have to have a job. Except the money that is being used to educate an extra 200,000 people, okay, because teachers don't work for free, okay, all those stipends, and money's got to come from somewhere. That's been coming from all the money that Europe has donated and that the U.S. has donated. So we are literally paying their younger generation not to fight the war. That's where our money's going. Zelenskyy wants all this equipment, but doesn't have any troops to use it. So he wants European troops, and he's asked for American troops to go in and fight the war. Because their governmental policy is, if you go to college, you don't have to fight. So the Ukrainians won't fight for their own sovereignty, but the rest of the world is supposed to. I mean, if you start to hear how crazy this is, and like I said, I mean, the ultimate shyster here, swindler, whatever you want to call Zelenskyy, this is actually what's going on. So then his latest idea is when Europe is saying, where do you expect us to come up with all this money to pay for all of this? You want us to pay your people not to fight, and you want us to send our people that we have to pay to fight with our equipment that we have to pay for. What are you doing again, right? So Zelenskyy's brilliant idea was, well, why don't you seize all the Russian assets that are held in the EU? And even the EU looked at him like he had three heads, because, as their comment went, as soon as we seize all the Russian assets, what do you think the Russians going to do with all the EU assets that were invested in Russia? I mean, I don't know. Let's think about something like a pipeline, for example, Gazprom or anything there. Okay, lots of European assets in Russia. So Russia would seize all those assets too. So this is what you end up with. Zelenskyy is literally insane enough that he is thinking that his people won't fight, his country won't pay to defend their country. Somebody else is supposed to send their troops, pay the bills, have their assets seized so that they can go do the work for a war that he refuses to end. This is literally what's going on. This is how stupid this is. It's not like Russia wants to take over the whole country of Ukraine. I mean, they want Lugansk, Donetsk, the Donbass region. That's what they want. You can talk about Crimea all you want. But here's the problem you have. And this is where we get into the younger generation. Liberalism, classic neoliberalism, which is basically a cancer across the world, has raised a bunch of pussies, period. Okay, pardon my French. That all these people, all these Ukrainians, are running away from their country, are draft dodging, doing whatever they can to stay out of the war. It's funny. Think about if this happened in the United States. Okay, just think for a second. Sure, you can go back to Vietnam and we had our draft dodgers, and don't anybody give me shit about Trump being a draft dodger. Okay, I don't even want it. That will get you deleted real quick. All right? Please remind me about Joe Biden's or Barack Obama's or Bill Clinton's military service before you open your mouth. All right? But think about it today. Our young people. They're running around with their purple hair, their skinny jeans, their soy lattes, can't figure out if they are male or female. What would happen if the U.S. got in some sort of war? What happens if, let's make it easy. Let's not make it silly. Let's say China decides they want to take over the West Coast, right? We already know China's got military personnel up in Canada. They could make a move relatively quickly. Hell, even say that they wanted to go after Alaska. Pick something. Do you think Ukraine would be there to help us? No, we're not a member of NATO. We don't have to do anything, not our fight. Right? That would be their response. What do you think the EU would be able to do? Well, we can send you a couple of cooks. That's about all we've got. Maybe we got 4 tanks that work. That would be about it. Okay. Again, the smattering of airplanes that Great Britain has. Thanks. You're not. So we're on our own. And then you look at the military age males, at least the ones that know they are male, in the United States. How many of them would run to Canada? I mean, literally, think about this. The Canadian border would be flooded with soy boys. Then you talk about the rest of us. You know, Mrs. P and I were talking yesterday. She goes, what would we do if there was ever a war on American soil? And my answer was, I'll die on this hill. I ain't running away. Okay? Sure, I'm 60, not 20. You know, I'm closer to the end of my life than the beginning of my life. I'll still fight. Most people I know, most of you guys, probably all you guys, unless we have a couple of liberals who decide to watch this video, would be the same. May not run as fast as I used to, but my index finger still works well. And as long as my eyesight is good enough, I can still hit a target from a few hundred yards away, no problem. We'd fight. And there's the difference. Just like in Ukraine, we would see all the America-hating, soy boy liberals, Hollywood elites run to Canada. And as I said to Mrs. P, maybe that wouldn't be such a bad idea, because once they left, you aren't welcome back. Pinball out.